which uses data from 2005. If what you were saying is accurate and valid, why are we ignoring the current data?
This is the second time that he's lied.
Okay, so he doesn't want to answer that question and instead says that I'm lying. Well, that's simple enough to prove. Now, he says I'm lying, that he's not using the data from the maltreatment report, he's using completely different data from a different report, the male perpetrator report. And yet in my comments he says that this was one of the sources that both he and the article are using, but I'd only addressed one of them and needed to address the other 5. So already we're not off to a great start, but let's address each of the sources and we'll see who is telling the truth. Okay, so the first reference, mothers, men, and CPS involvement. And it shows the highest rates of CPS involvement are when the biological father is present, but father to some, not all of the children, which already refutes his claim that biological fathers offer the most protection. I also called it out in my prior video. The absolute worst outcomes are actually single fathers with a new partner, not single mothers. Now, to be fair, the study goes on to say that with controls in place, this is no longer a statistically significant difference. But there's also no difference between the biological father of some being present and no biological father at all, disproving exactly the kind of hierarchy he's suggesting, that it's better to be with the bio father than the bio mother. Okay, so on to reference number 2. The 4th National Incidence Study of Child Abuse and Neglect, which does show that mothers are more likely to be the perpetrator of maltreatment, but biological fathers were slightly more likely to commit abuse than biological mothers, 54% to 51%, which again refutes his claim that biological fathers offer more protection from abuse. Moving on to reference number 3. Are father surrogates a risk factor for child maltreatment? Now, this study used data from 30 years ago, 1991, doesn't look at biological fathers, and only looked at mother-infant pairs to compare households with the biological mother to two-parent households. And yet this study also found no statistically significant difference in risk of maltreatment. Now, I'm going to skip ahead to reference number 6. This is just census data that's used to cite birth rates, and so it's not a relevant source for his claims, so we can ignore it and move on. So back to references 4 and 5, which, as you remember, he says are totally different data. Now, the Child Maltreatment Report gets its data from the National Child Abuse and Neglect Data System, specifically looking at reports from 2005 to 2009, which, as I pointed out, has been superseded by the more recent data from 2022. But the Male Perpetrator Report, however, is completely different. It gets its data from the National Child Abuse and Neglect Data System, only using an even older data set from 2002, which it also says in the title. So yeah, his claims are based on the same outdated 20-year-old data that has been superseded. Now, the original article that he cited as his source uses all of these references and discusses this nuance. He, however, doesn't discuss any of it. He's made multiple videos making this claim, all based off repeating the same single statistic from the introduction of the Male Perpetrator Report. But what he hasn't shown you is the conclusion of the Male Perpetrators Report, which says that its findings are that male perpetrators who are not the biological father are more likely to commit physical abuse and SA. But biological fathers and father surrogates are also more likely to commit physical abuse and SA. If you're keeping score, he's 0 for 5. Not a single one of those references back his claims about abuse or assault. Now, at this point, you might be curious. Why would you cite an article where all the references not only don't back up your argument, but actively expose what you're saying as a lie? Well, that's because it's not his argument. He's letting ChatGPT write it for him. He openly shows in many of his videos that he's using AI to source his claims, which is why he's so ignorant of what is actually in the studies he's claiming are his sources. He hasn't read them. Now, this might seem intellectually dishonest, but it actually makes a lot of sense, since AI, very much like men's rights activists, is prone to hallucinate and just invent things that aren't true. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. In short, his claim that mothers are higher perpetrators of assault than men is false. His claim that biological fathers offer a greater protection from abuse is also false. Biological fathers commit assault and abuse at higher rates than biological mothers. So once again, always check sources, don't trust what anyone tells you, and if nothing else, know that if someone's entire argument refuting decades of consistent evidence on a topic with dozens of studies hinges on one single statistic from one study from 20 years ago, then it's probably not true.